We'll discuss a lot of issues about campaigning, but this time we have an esteemed guest joining us, Krishna Vankala, Indian-American youth from Virginia, who will be giving his insights with regards to all that's been taking place in the US over the last couple of months when we speak of the campaigns. Krishna, a very good evening to you. It is late there, we are aware, and welcome to News 9.
Yes, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Krishna, let me begin the question with regards to a youth voter at this given point. We've heard both ends of it. In fact, from what the surveys have to say, there seems to be a lot of polarization that is there deep within, and that has in fact been exposed with regards to these polls. Female voters seem to be supporting Kamala Harris more, while the male voters are more inclined towards Trump. As a youth voter yourself, what would you say is the most important issue? Has the abortion rights fight struck a chord with you at all? Or is immigration a much bigger issue for you as an Indian American?
Well, this is actually a very informed, good question. Because I think abortion rights do play a very big role when it comes to female youth voters. But as a male youth voter myself, it also plays an issue for me because reproductive rights, it's much farther than just woman or man. It stretches to whether you think the government should have a say in what you do with your reproductive rights, with your body. And that stretches across gender. It goes into a much deeper thing. And that's why I think that abortion rights still has some salience among the male voter demographic. And other than abortion, it would also be healthcare is also a pretty big issue. Healthcare access is one really big issue that youth voters care about. And along with that, climate change. The climate is a very big thing, especially youth voters. I believe in these surveys, most of them, they show that youth voters, it's like number one, number two, number three, top three issues. Climate is always going to be there, climate and healthcare. But yes, immigration, you were talking about immigration being a big issue itself as well. The humane treatment of people coming through our asylums, making sure that, even if people come across illegally and undocumented, making sure that they're treated humanely, that's also a pretty big thing for people in my age group.
Right, Krishna. So when we speak of immigration, we've seen the kind of influence that Indian American voters had during 2008 supporting Barack Obama, for that matter. Do we see such an influence? Do we see Kamala Harris's roots? Because in fact, very recently, she had mentioned about her connect with her mother. She recalled her times with her mother and how her journey has been an inspiration to Harris. Do you think the Indian Americans, this particular aspect of Kamala Harris resonates with the Indian Americans there?
Well, I believe when Kamala Harris, when she talked about her mother, she would emphasize, I believe she was a researcher, a cancer researcher. She came to America as an immigrant. She made a good name for herself in the field. She did a lot of hard work in the cancer field. And I mean, it's something, politics aside, it's something I feel like we should be really grateful for. And I believe emphasizing those specific parts of her biography, talking about how she came here, with big dreams, big ambition. That's something I believe Indian immigrants can relate to, regardless of, how you got here. I feel like that's the one big thing that trumps all of them. It's like what you're trying to achieve. And I believe her emphasizing that part of her biography is what really helped her connect with at least most of the Indian American voters that I talk to when I bring up that part of her biography. That's always something that I see that's mentioned.
In fact, here I would also like your opinion on what do you think about Donald Trump having made a mention about American Indian ties, A, and B, the Bangladeshi Hindus. He'd made that comment wishing Diwali, in fact, only a few days ago. Would you say that is also an attempt being made by Trump to, woo the Indian American voters, if we may use the term here?
Let me tell you, he's done much more than just that. In 2016, when he ran, he cut out a TV ad, and I remember this very vividly because I was in 4th or 5th grade, and he ran an ad saying something like, I believe Narendra Modi ran an ad saying, for his campaign, he said, Abhi ki bar Modi Sarkar, and Trump basically kind of copied it.
Yes.
And he made an ad saying, Abhi ki bar Trump Sarkar.
Right,
it's always been a thing for him. So, it's definitely like, you're talking about, it's in order to get votes. That's something that he's done
and
consistently.
So this
isn't something that's out of the blue.
Does it work with the Indian American voters, though?
Can you repeat that?
I'm just asking, does that work with the Indian American voters, though? Does it resonate with them?
Well, considering most exit polls show him losing the Indian American voting demographic by quite a bit, I really don't think so. Anecdotally, I can say I know a lot of Indian American Republican voters. Yeah, you're gonna find them in a lot of places, but the sheer population, I believe there's like upwards of a few million. I think it's like 1 to 2
2.3
million Indian
million.
American.
2.3
Thank
million
you
at
for the
this very
exact
point.
number.
Yes. Yeah.
That's wow. So there's 2.3 million Indian Americans in America, and of them, like I believe, like about half of them. So what is that? Nearly a million Indian voters. So using anecdotes, like I know a few Indian Americans. That's not, and that vote Republican. That's not a fair representation of the entire demographic. So when you look at all these surveys and stuff, they give you like a more accurate picture where it's like they tend, like Indian American voters as a whole, tend to lean on the more liberal side. So they tend to go more for the liberal side. So I believe when Trump does this stuff where he's trying to reach out to Indians, he's not trying to outright win it, but rather he's trying to cut down the margin of how much he loses this demographic by.
Right, right, absolutely. So, while there is a lot that rides on the Indian American voters at this given point, given their considerable population and even their contribution to the taxes in the US, I think Trump's economic policies also have a lot to do with the way people vote, because he is a businessman, out and out businessman and a politician. What would you have to say with regards to his economic policies, and where do the Indian Americans stand about that?
Well, see, right, if you remind everyone, okay, before COVID, everyone remembers it as being this whole rosy picture, like, oh, the economy was so wonderful. You know, we didn't have, because of COVID, we had the whole like lockdowns. And after everything opened up, we had the inflation spikes because of demand rising suddenly. And so now everyone remembers before COVID as being this whole rosy, oh, everything was so great. But we have to remember that Donald Trump, the economy that he inherited was Barack Obama's economy that, you know, he got a 4% inflation, not inflation, sorry. He got a 4% unemployment rate given to him. And when you talk about economic policy, everyone remembers that specific image in their head. We're like, oh, everything used to be cheap and all this. But when you go into the specifics of Donald Trump's economic policy, something that I found, which immediately turns people off, is when you talk about his tariff plan. I think it's like what, 100%, 200% tariff plan, where it's like a price on all the imports coming into this country, which Nobel Prize winning economists are saying will like make inflation even more worse than it already is. I feel like when politicians attack specifics of economic plans, they need to go specifically into the policy. And one thing I feel like Indian Americans, like at least like I've talked to a few, like I mean, I have family friends, right? When we talk about politics,
Absolutely.
whenever I specifically bring up tariffs, especially with electric vehicles, that's a big thing here in America, right? Every other person you know owns a Tesla. And so when you bring up electric vehicle tariffs, that's going to increase the price of these electric vehicles. And so when you're just talking about a tariff on every single thing that comes into the nation, that's going to increase the price of every single thing coming in. So I feel like that's something that should be worth mentioning.
Absolutely, Krishna. It was a pleasure having you with us on News9. Thank you so much for your interesting insights as to which way the Indian Americans are being wooed at this very 2024 US presidential polls.